Morbid facts. In 2001, Ashton Kutcher had a girlfriend who was murdered by a serial killer after being stabbed 35 times in her own home. Kutcher would end up testifying in the trial of the Hollywood Ripper, who would later confess to murdering at least 10 women over a 15-year span. Author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, lost her virginity on top of her mother's grave. She also kept her dead husband's heart and carried it around for 30 years until her own death. According to the FBI, if you're murdered in the United States, there's only about a 40% chance that your killer will be found and punished. In 2009, a Russian man went to the doctor suspecting that there was something wrong with his lungs. Initially, doctors thought they were dealing with a tumor, but it ended up being something they'd never seen before. It turned out that years ago, the man accidentally inhaled the seed of a fir tree and it started growing inside of him. This was the last photo taken of Marie Joseph before she drowned in the swimming pool shown. Due to the cloudy water, her body wasn't found for 2 days, during which time people continued swimming in the pool unaware that Marie's body was decomposing beneath them. In 2011, scientists conducted an experiment to find out what's inside the average human belly button. One individual who hadn't bathed in years hosted 2 species of bacteria that are typically only found in ice caps and thermal vents. In the year 2000, an orca whale killed a great white shark off the coast of California. According to satellite tags, the smell of the dead shark's carcass apparently caused all nearby great whites to suddenly vanish. One shark that was in the region immediately dove down 500 meters and swam straight to Hawaii without stopping. In 2013, a Finnish photographer captured the extraordinary friendship between a female gray wolf and a male brown bear. They shared their food and spent several nights together over a 10-day span before parting ways. Anonychia is the absence of one or more nails on the fingers or toes. In extremely rare cases like this one, the patient might be missing every single one of their nails. This bull was born without the protein myostatin, allowing for unrestricted muscle growth. 50 light years from Earth, there's a dwarf star named Lucy that's made almost completely out of diamonds. It's about the same mass as the sun and weighs an estimated 10 billion trillion carats. Photographer Jocelyn Anderson captured this once-in-a-lifetime shot of a blackbird catching a ride on an osprey's stick. On November 26, 2012, something happened for the first and only time in the history of New York City. There was not one single report of a violent crime. Alan Lee Davis was convicted of 3 counts of murder after killing a pregnant woman and her 2 daughters in 1982. When he was executed in 1999, it took 3 runs of the electric chair to kill him. Due to the botched execution, he remains the last person to be executed by electric chair in the state of Florida. This 1985 photo was taken on board Japanese Airlines Flight 123 just minutes before the plane crashed into a mountainside. There were 520 fatalities, including everyone shown in this photo. In 2017, Las Vegas police arrested Shane Schindler, the prime suspect in the sledgehammer murders of 2 homeless men. Police set up a sting in which they disguised a mannequin as a homeless man and left it on the street. This is a photo of Schindler bashing the mannequin with the sledgehammer, thus proving he was the killer. This 1998 photo was taken in Omagh, Ireland, just minutes before a bomb placed in the red car exploded. 29 people were killed by the blast and another 220 were injured. The cameraman of the photo died, but the man shown with his daughter happened to survive. A healthy human heart can only beat for about 1 minute when removed from the body. But the heart of a coke user can beat for up to 25 minutes outside of the body. In 2011, a 17-year-old boy jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge to impress his friends. The jump has a 98% death rate, but the boy survived with only minor bruising. In 1980, 7-year-old Anna Bachmeyer was sexually assaulted before being strangled to death by her 35-year-old neighbor. During the trial, Anna's mother opened fire in a crowded courtroom and murdered the man. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but was released after 3. In 1997, tree hugger Julia Hill started living in a 1,500-year-old California redwood tree to prevent loggers from cutting it down. She ended up staying there for a total of 738 days, and the tree still remains standing today. The longest-running car is a 1966 Volvo with more than 3 million miles on it. That's enough mileage to make 7 round trips to the moon. The world record time for eating 3 72-ounce steaks is held by a 120-pound woman who scarfed them down in 20 minutes. The world's longest manned flight was set in 1959 when Bob Tim and John Cook stayed airborne for 64 straight days. The Cessna plane was refueled over 128 times by a truck chasing it from below. The longest-lasting battery powers a bell at Oxford University that's been continuously ringing since 1840. Nobody knows what the battery is made of and doesn't want to risk destroying it to find out. On his 20th birthday in 1970, Bill Murray joked with a random passenger on his flight that he had some bombs in his suitcase. Soon enough, authorities were called in and ended up arresting Murray for attempting to smuggle 10 pounds of marijuana. Prisoners waiting to be executed on death row in America are given a physical beforehand to ensure that they're fit enough to die. In 2006, a woman farted on a commercial plane and tried to cover the smell by lighting matches. This immediately called for an emergency landing and an FBI investigation. In 1995, a French court found a man guilty of killing a teenage girl, but he was able to avoid jail time by hiding out in Germany. 14 years later, the victim's father hired a private team to locate the killer and kidnap him. They ended up finding him and dumping him in front of a French courthouse, which would later sentence him to 15 years in prison. When designing the Eiffel Tower, Gustave Eiffel included a secret apartment for himself at the top. It came with a kitchen, bathroom, and living room, and he often used the space to entertain notable guests like Thomas Edison. Only first discovered in 2009, Vietnam's Hang Son Doong is considered the largest known cave system in the world. It's more than 3 miles long and 600 feet high, which is so massive that it literally has its own weather system. Crooked Forest in Poland is a small section of pine trees in the middle of the woods that are oddly contorted with a 90-degree bend. It's generally believed that a human method caused them to grow this way, but its true origin remains a mystery. The center of the universe is an acoustic anomaly found in Tulsa, Oklahoma. If you stand in the center, your voice will echo back at you several times louder, but no one standing outside of the circle will hear a thing. In the year 2000, Rick Norsegian went to a garage sale looking for a barber chair, but ended up purchasing 2 boxes of old photos for $45. 4 years later, he discovered that the boxes contained 65 glass plate negatives from famous photographer Ansel Adams, worth right around $200 million. The crew of this ship raised its anchor, only to realize it was hooked on an unexploded torpedo. After Martin Luther King was killed in 1968, his funeral was held at Morehouse College in Atlanta. A small group of current students were chosen to be ushers at his funeral, and one of them was Samuel L. Jackson. Violet Jessop was a ship nurse in the early 1900s who couldn't seem to avoid disaster. She was on the Titanic when it sank, the Britannic when it was struck by a torpedo, and the Olympic when it collided with another ship. Violet managed to survive all 3. 5 members of the Trinidad family died when Alvin Hubbard crashed into the family minivan, leaving Mother Mary Rose as the only survivor. Alvin claimed the crash was caused by a coughing fit, and he only received 1 year probation since prosecutors couldn't find any evidence of reckless conduct. After the sentencing, Mary Rose said it was as if her family was killed all over again. On Friday the 13th in October 1972, a plane carrying 45 people crashed into the Andes Mountains. Faced with radio reports that the search for them had been abandoned, the survivors had to resort to eating their friends. 16 remaining survivors were finally rescued 72 days after the initial crash. In 2012, a beachcomber in Canada came across an old Harley-Davidson that washed ashore. Turns out the bike was lost in the 2011 Japanese tsunami and managed to float all the way across the Pacific. Author Lois Duncan wrote many popular crime and suspense novels throughout the 70s and 80s, but she essentially stopped writing completely when her own daughter became the victim of an unsolved murder in 1989. In 2020, a fan drove 3 hours to deliver a much-needed dose of insulin to rapper Boozy Badass. She refused to accept any payment other than a photo with him. But on her way home, she stopped at a gas station, bought a scratch-off ticket, and won 10 grand. In 2004, grandmother Dorothy Fletcher suddenly suffered a heart attack on her flight to Florida. When the stewardess asked if there was a doctor on board, 15 people stood up. They were on their way to a cardiology conference. This is what an unshorn sheep looks like. Shrek the sheep ran away from his owner in 1998 to avoid being sheared. 6 years later, he was found living in a cave with enough wool to produce 20 men's suits. Born to a white father and a Jamaican mother, Lucy and Maria Aylmer are biracial twins from the UK that no one believes are sisters. Hercules, the 900-pound liger, is officially recognized as the largest cat in the world. He lives at a wildlife preserve in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. The New York Strip. Due to rapid snowmelt, Austria's Green Lake is a dry park in the winter and a 30-foot deep lake in the spring. At around $5,000 per pound, saffron is easily the world's most expensive spice. This is because 75,000 flowers need to be plucked by hand just to make 1 pound of it. On 9/11, hospitals throughout New York City were bracing for maximum capacity, only to slowly realize that there were very few survivors of the collapse. Of the 3,000 people who were buried, only about 20 were pulled from the rubble. Since 1982, a team of researchers have been going deeper and deeper into the Veryovkina Cave, the deepest cave in the world. At 1,100 meters deep in 2021, they found the body of a climber dangling from a rope. A suicidal man spent months building a secret room in his home containing a homemade guillotine. He then lay down inside the guillotine, took sleeping pills, and set a timer for the blade to drop. His decapitated body was discovered by his father, who was completely unaware of his son's gruesome plan. Here are some morbid facts about D-Day. While his comrades were being shot all around him, Canadian piper Bill Millen was playing the bagpipes during the storming of Normandy. German snipers later said they didn't shoot him because they thought he had gone crazy and was not considered a threat. The son of President Teddy Roosevelt was the oldest man in the D-Day invasion at the age of 56. Despite arthritis and a heart condition, he stormed the beach with a cane and survived. 1 month later, he died of a heart attack and was posthumously awarded a Medal of Honor. The fighting on Normandy Beach was so intense that 4% of its sand is still made up of broken down shrapnel from D-Day. In Saving Private Ryan, the Omaha Beach scene was so realistic that many veterans left theaters during the opening scene, claiming that it was the most realistic depiction of combat they had ever watched. Soviet cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev set the world record for time traveling after spending 803 days in orbit around the Earth. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, this means Sergei effectively traveled 0.02 seconds forward in time. The oldest known operating bar in the world is Sean's Bar in Ireland. Archaeological records have found that the bar has been serving people since 900 AD, well over 1,000 years ago. Former President of Liberia Charles King holds the world record for the most fraudulent election in history. He won the 1927 election with 234,000 votes in a country with 15,000 voters. In 1964, 17-year-old Randy Gardner set the world record for the longest time without sleep after staying awake for 11 straight days. The Guinness Book of World Records refuses to validate any attempt to break this since it's so dangerous to human health. Queen Elizabeth had 2 first cousins named Nerissa and Catherine Lyon who were severely disabled. Nerissa was publicly pronounced dead in 1940, while her sister Catherine was said to have died in 1961. But it was later revealed that they were actually tucked away in a mental asylum without any visits from the royal family until their actual deaths in 1986 and 2014. The U.S. military buys a prank fart spray called liquid ass to train and prepare medics for the stench of the battlefield. This is a 1969 photo of Roman Polanski kneeling next to the door where the word pig is written in his wife Sharon Tate's blood. While Polanski was working on a film in Europe, Tate was stabbed 16 times by members of the Manson family when she was 8.5 months pregnant. Polanski has said that the murders changed him forever and that not being there is his greatest life regret. Hidden behind Mount Rushmore is a secret vault containing important information about the United States and its history. The room is not accessible to the public and is instead meant to serve as a record for people who come across the monument thousands of years from now. Hidden Beach is a feature of Mexico's Marietta Islands that looks like something straight out of a storybook. The beach was accidentally discovered in the early 1900s when the Mexican military conducted artillery tests in the area. North Korea's Pyramid of Pyongyang is a 105-story triangle skyscraper that was supposed to open in 1989. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, North Korea was never able to complete the project due to financial crisis. More than 30 years later, the building still remains completely abandoned today. Morbid Facts, Part 264. In 1997, episode 38 of the Pokemon anime aired just one time before being pulled from TV forever. The episode featured a flashing strobe effect that sent nearly 700 children to the hospital due to dizziness, nausea, and seizures. The The incident nearly single-handedly ruined the franchise, and the Pokemon Porygon was banned from ever appearing in an episode again. P.T. Barnum began his career as a showman after purchasing a blind slave woman named Joyce Heth. Barnum claimed she was over 160 years old and had been the nanny of George Washington. He exhibited her until her death in 1836 and even charged people 50 cents to watch her autopsy. Syrian archaeologist Khaled al-Assad dedicated his life to the excavation of the ancient city of Palmyra. In 2015, he was tortured and later beheaded by ISIS after refusing to give up the location of precious artifacts. Here are some morbid facts about Richard Ramirez. Like many other serial killers, Richard's childhood was far from pleasant. His father often physically abused him and would sometimes make him spend the night tied to a cross in a graveyard as a form of punishment. And when Richard was just 13, his cousin fatally shot his wife right in front of him. Ramirez was obsessed with satanic themes and symbols and would draw pentagrams on his victims' bodies. He would even force some of his victims to pray to Satan in their final moments instead of to God. In one of his interviews, Ramirez said, "When I die, I want to be buried with sunglasses on and my hands behind my head, so that when I deteriorate, I'll be the chillest skeleton in the graveyard." In 1996, a fan of Ramirez married him in prison after it was already proven he'd murdered 13 adults. But she broke up with him 12 years later when DNA evidence showed that he also killed a 9-year-old girl. In 2016, a baby girl named Lindley was born twice. At 23 weeks, a Nigerian surgeon removed her from the womb to cut a tumor from her spine. He then put her back in the womb, and 12 weeks later, Lindley was born healthy. Only discovered in 1985, Rainbow Lattice Sunstone is an extremely rare igneous rock. Known for its unique lattice pattern, it can only be found in the remote part of an Australian desert. In 2015, Amur the tiger was given a goat to eat, but miraculously became best friends with him instead. The extremely rare Texas star fungus can only be found in 2 locations throughout the world, Texas and Japan. Now this is a thick, juicy ribeye. In 1978, Soviet geologists found a family of 6 surviving in the middle of the Siberian wilderness. They'd been living in isolation for more than 40 years and were completely unaware of World War II. These are the greatest terrorist fails of all time. In 2016, a Somalian suicide bomber brought explosives onto a commercial flight with the intent of blowing up the plane. 20 minutes after takeoff, the explosives detonated and blasted a hole in the side of the plane. The bomber was immediately sucked out and ended up being the only person killed. In 2007, Glasgow baggage handler John Smeaton kicked an attempted suicide bomber in the balls. He was later awarded the Queen's Gallantry Medal for his bravery. In 1999, 3 suicide bombers prematurely exploded because the bombs were set on daylight savings time. On New Year's Eve in 2011, a bomber planned on blowing up Moscow's crowded Red Square with a mobile phone bomb. But her plan failed miserably when she received a spam text wishing her a Happy New Year. This caused the bomb to go off while she was still in the safe house, and she was the only fatality. In 1981, a Vietnam War veteran was threatening to jump off a building when boxing legend Muhammad Ali sprinted up the stairs. He told the man, "I am your brother, I love you," and the man immediately came inside and started crying. Ali then proceeded to drive the man to the hospital in his Rolls Royce. A group of sperm whales adopted a bottlenose dolphin with a spinal deformity after it was rejected by its own dolphin group. The Falkland Island minefields became an accidental nature preserve for penguins, who don't weigh enough to set them off. In 2005, Mr. T vowed to never wear a gold chain again after seeing all the people who lost everything to Hurricane Katrina. Bill Hast injected himself with snake venom for 60 years to build up his immunities. He survived nearly 200 venomous snake bites, donated blood to snakebite victims, and lived to the age of 100. While filming Night at the Museum 3, Robin Williams struggled with panic attacks and often had trouble remembering even one line. His autopsy later revealed that he'd been suffering from a severe form of dementia and lost more than 40% of the dopamine neurons in his brain. Twice convicted murderer Thomas Grasso was executed by lethal injection in 1995. His last words were, "Please tell the media I did not get my SpaghettiOs, I got spaghetti. I want the press to know this." After being arrested for joyriding in a stolen police car, Shane Goldsby got his sister's rapist as a cellmate in 2020. but despite repeatedly asking for a transfer, no action was taken. After the man taunted him for days with specific details about the assault, Goldsby snapped and stomped the man to death. Goldsby later pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and had 25 years added to his sentence. These are some of the most insane mummies ever found. In 1980, when a group of loggers were cutting off the top of a chestnut oak tree, they noticed the mummified remains of a hunting dog. Experts believe that it chased its prey up the tree in the 1960s, only to get stuck there and eventually die. The dog was posthumously named Stucky. This Incan girl was found perfectly preserved at the base of an Argentinian volcano. Her frozen body has been hailed as one of the best preserved Incan mummies ever found, since her skin, hair, and clothes all remain perfectly intact. She was likely the victim of a religious sacrifice some 500 years ago. A 2,200-year-old Chinese mummy named Lady Di is considered to be the best preserved ancient mummy in the world. Her skin, organs, and veins are still well intact, as doctors could still perform a checkup on her and even a gynecological exam. Sadly, she was buried in 21 gallons of a liquid that remains a mystery to this day. The average adult dog can count to 5 and understand about 165 words, including signs, signals, and gestures. But the smartest dogs can understand up to 250 words, putting them at the same intellectual level as a 2.5-year-old human. The call of the void is the feeling you experience when you're high up somewhere and feel like you're gonna jump, even though you never will. If you ever need to tell a convincing lie, just do it when you have to pee. According to the inhibitory spillover effect, people are much better liars when they have a full bladder. In the 1973 Rosenhan experiment, a Stanford psychologist and his associates faked having mental disorders to be admitted to various mental asylums across the U.S. They then acted completely normally, but were forced to admit to having a mental illness and agree to take antipsychotic drugs before they could be released. Morbid Facts, Part 255. After suffering a stroke that left him speech impaired, legendary actor Kirk Douglas tried to commit suicide by shooting himself through the mouth. But the barrel of the gun hit his tooth and it hurt him so badly that he didn't go through with it. He was then so amused that a toothache had stopped him from killing himself that he decided to live. In 2009, a drunk Russian man named Alexei Rostkov jumped out of his 5th-story window after drinking 3 bottles of vodka. When he returned only to find his wife screaming at him, he decided to jump a second time and survived again. In order to enforce prohibition in the 1920s, the Prohibition Bureau began adding poison to industrial alcohol to prevent people from drinking it. Supporters of the policy argued that victims were basically killing themselves by breaking the law. Up to 50,000 people were killed as a result of the government's poisoning. Here are some morbid facts about Star Wars. Before filming The Empire Strikes Back, Mark Hamill was in a car accident that nearly killed him and required reconstructive facial surgery using part of his ear. Hamill thought the injuries would ruin his career, but they were explained in the movie when Luke gets attacked by a Wampa. While filming Return of the Jedi in the forests of California, the actor who played Chewbacca was given strict instructions to never wander off. This was because the film crew was afraid that hunters would mistake him for Bigfoot and try to kill him. In The Phantom Menace, young Anakin Skywalker was played by actor Jake Lloyd. But at the age of 12, he retired from acting due to bullying and destroyed all of his Star Wars memorabilia. Years later, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia after being involved in a high-speed car chase with police. These are some of the worst movie set disasters in history. David Holmes was Daniel Radcliffe's stunt double in the Harry Potter films until a freak accident abruptly ended his career. While filming for the Deathly Hallows, Holmes was thrown too hard against the wall and ended up breaking his neck, paralyzing him from the chest down. In the early 90s, Bruce Lee's son Brandon was making a name for himself until tragedy struck while he was filming for The Crow. A bullet was lodged in the barrel of a prop gun and ended up hitting Lee right in the chest, killing him at the young age of 28. While filming for the 1983 Twilight Zone movie, one scene called for an explosion to happen underneath a flying helicopter. But the explosion caused the helicopter to spin out of control, resulting in the death of star Vic Morrow and 2 young child actors. This led to Hollywood abandoning helicopter scenes for years until the prevalence of CGI. Sculptor Michael Richards was killed in his art studio on the 92nd floor of the North Tower on 9/11. His art ironically focused on planes, including a sculpture of airplanes piercing a cast of his own body. In 1948, Cecil Harris became pinned under his tractor on his Saskatchewan farm. Fearing he may not survive, he used a pocket knife to scratch his will onto part of the tractor. It said, "In case I die in this mess, I leave all to my wife." Once the man died, the will was cut off the tractor and legally accepted in court. Philip Gale was a computer prodigy who was studying at MIT as a sophomore in 1998. One day he wrote on the chalkboard Newton's equation for how an object accelerates as it falls, along with a sketch of a stick figure tossing a chair. He then signed it "Phil was here" before throwing a chair through the window and jumping to his immediate death. Don Rickles, the voice of Mr. Potato Head, died before he could record any dialogue for Toy Story 4. But instead of replacing him, Disney reviewed 25 years of content from movies, video games, and other media. They were able to reassemble enough dialogue to cover the entire film. A grandpa was about to pass away, so he made the perfect parting gift for his grandkids. In the 1980s, a little girl named Beth was suffering from 100 seizures per day and was about to have half her brain removed in a major surgery. That's when her mother called to PBS asking for a note from Mr. Rogers just to assure the little girl that she'd be okay. When Mr. Rogers heard about this, he flew to visit her in the hospital and even brought his puppets to cheer her up. Beth survived the surgery and stayed close with Mr. Rogers until his death. A mysterious Coke machine in Seattle, Washington operated in the same spot for 20 years. The buttons were labeled mystery and dispensed a rare or even discontinued soda product when pressed. But nobody ever claimed to see somebody stocking the machine, and it disappeared in 2018 without a trace. The double tree of Casorzo in Italy is extremely unique in that it's two trees in one, a cherry tree on top of a mulberry tree. Being 100 feet in length, the American Dream is the longest car ever built. The party limo comes with a swimming pool, mini golf course, a helipad, and can fit 75 people inside. The Prime Rib. The Pacific Island Melanesians have blonde hair and dark skin. They're believed to be the only known living descendants of the Denisovans, a third species of human that existed alongside Homo sapiens and Neanderthals tens of thousands of years ago. In 1957, a stray dog named Laika became the first animal to ever orbit the Earth when she was the occupant of the Soviet spacecraft Sputnik 2. The dog was originally reported to have died painlessly in orbit about 1 week after takeoff. But nearly 50 years later, it was revealed that she likely died from panic and overheating just a few hours into the mission. There's a version of the tortoise and the hare where all the animals die in a forest fire. This was because the tortoise was given the job of warning everyone after winning the race and therefore being deemed the fastest. Hajime Fuji volunteered to be a kamikaze pilot but was denied because he had a wife and 2 kids. To honor his wish, his wife drowned their 2 young girls before taking her own life the same way. Hajime then achieved his dream of flying as a kamikaze, meeting his death in May of 1945. Gordon Ramsay set up a business in a London prison by teaching inmates how to cook and selling their goods on the outside. This provided the prison with financial support while giving the inmates cooking experience so they could find honest work once they got out. Ramsay even offered one inmate a job after losing to him in an onion dicing contest. In 1993, a Brazilian man tried to rob a glue factory but accidentally knocked over 2 large cans and spilled their contents. 36 hours later, police found him still glued to the floor, unable to move. In 2009, identical twins Hassan and Abbas were suspects in a $6.8 million jewelry heist. Authorities found DNA linking to the twins but were forced to release them both because it was impossible to determine which one had committed the crime. This is the grave of Elvis's twin brother Jesse, who was stillborn. Elvis would often tell his friends and family that he had a persistent feeling that Jesse was somehow with him throughout his life. Wherever he went, Elvis always wore the cross, the Star of David, and the Hebrew word Chai. This was so that when he died, he wouldn't miss out on heaven due to a technicality. But regardless, Elvis's struggle with drugs towards the end of his life was a losing battle. In the first 8 months of 1977 alone, Elvis's doctor prescribed him more than 10,000 doses of sedatives, amphetamines, and narcotics. This all resulted in his untimely death while sitting on the toilet at the young age of 42. His stool was so backed up from the drugs and his horrendous diet that he hadn't taken a dump in at least 4 months. In 1999, Jay-Z stabbed a man in the stomach with a 5-inch blade after rumors that the man was behind the bootlegging of one of his albums. He later pleaded guilty to third-degree assault and accepted a sentence of 3 years probation. Hans Schmidt was the only Catholic priest to ever be executed in the U.S. Once his mistress became pregnant, he slit her throat, drank her blood, and dismembered her body. He was found guilty of the heinous crime and executed via electric chair in 1916. In the year 2000, an art exhibit in Denmark featured 10 functioning blenders containing live goldfish. Visitors were given the option of pressing the on button to instantly kill one fish for absolutely no reason. At least one person pressed the button since 2 fish were dead by the end of the exhibition. The museum director was charged with and later acquitted of animal cruelty.